Okay, I think before we start, everybody, I'd like you to see a picture. May I show a picture of your beautiful...
Yes.
Do you call her Maddie?
Maddie.
Okay, this is the girl that we're talking about. This is Maddie. And again, another Gardasil story, and sadly, Maddie died as a result of this. So you will hear Maddie's story. Her mum is brave. This really did not happen that long ago.
June 24th.
June 24th this year. So it's very, very raw, and thank you so much for coming to talk. We'll put Maddie's picture on the bus in a minute. All right, so I think let's go back. Let's go back first of all and talk about you. How many children have you got?
I have two.
You have two, of which Maddie was one.
She was our oldest.
She was oldest. And let's talk about you as a mum. What was your feeling on vaccines before she had this Gardasil?
I was a rule follower. I just did what my doctor said. Pediatrician that we saw, we actually had more of a connection. We went to the same church, and my son was a classmate of hers. And I don't know that I would call her a friend, but it was more than just a patient-doctor relationship. And she recommended the vaccine for Maddie.
The Gardasil vaccine. Did she say what it would be good for?
Preventing cervical cancer. But I knew that it was a very new vaccine, and I don't know why, but for some reason I was a bit reluctant, and so I had turned it down a couple of times, but then it would have been in December of 2015. She was 15 years old, and she developed...
Is it after one vaccine?
No, she hadn't had any yet.
She hadn't had any, okay.
Had no Gardasil at that point. But she was having periods all the time.
Yeah.
And she was diagnosed with either anovulatory bleeding or polycystic ovarian syndrome, And she wanted to put her on birth control. And I felt like I wanted a second opinion. And so I took her to my gynecologist, who I had seen for years, and she told us that it was anovulatory bleeding, and that yes,
so it was what?
Anovulatory bleeding, right. And that the way that they treat that is with birth control. And oh, by the way, while you're here, we need to do Gardasil because it's the latest and greatest thing. And I had had the discussions with the pediatrician, and I consented, and
but so wait, she was in there because she had problems with her bleeding, and they're suggesting that she has the HPV Gardasil while you're there, even though that she's not regular and things aren't quite right.
And they put her on birth control, and they gave her the first dose of the vaccine on the same day. And looking back, I do know that she had a reaction after the first one, but we attributed it to side effects of the birth control pills. And she struggled for quite a while, and I was calling the pediatrician, I was calling the gynecologist, and she finally switched her, I think 2 different times, to different birth control pills, and she finally got her to one that we felt like she could tolerate. But like I said, in hindsight, I think that those side effects were probably related to the vaccine, and maybe a combination of both. So then she gets the second dose, which was, or the first dose was February 3rd of 2012. I think I said 2015 earlier. I apologize for that.
Okay.
It's 2012.
It's okay.
And then she gets the second dose on April 2nd of 2012, and that's really when everything changed dramatically. She was unable to get out of bed. She had this horrible headache. The doctors referred to it as a migraine-like headache because it had all the symptoms, but it didn't respond to any of the medications. And she had, her memory was gone. She used to have what she called a photographic memory. It was very easy for her to learn. She was an excellent student. And all of that went away. She was, chronically tired. And
what would happen when you would, say to the doctor, look, she was fine, she had the second vaccine, she's now got headaches, she can't concentrate. Would the doctor respond? How would they respond?
it was just a coincidence. It would have happened anyway, and it just so happened to line up with the vaccines. But what was really interesting is through the course of this whole thing, she saw probably 10 to 12 different specialists over a year and a half. And the only two doctors that would refuse to entertain the idea that this could be a reaction to Gardasil were the pediatrician and the gynecologist. Those were the two that were actually treating her at the time. But every other specialist that I took her to said absolutely could be tied. Now they said it would be.
So wait, the pediatrician and the
gynecologist
are the two people that say it's not the vaccine, and everybody else says it could be the vaccine. So they're the two people that are getting money making money out of this vaccine. Are saying it's not. Interesting. Can't be a coincidence.
So, we spent a year and a half basically just spinning our wheels with. I would take her from one doctor to the next.
Could you go into more detail on her pain and what we're actually talking about? Because it's very similar to the other Gardasil. I'm just going to remind everybody as you talk of your beautiful daughter.
The debilitating headache. We had to black out all the light from her room. She couldn't stand brightness. She didn't leave her bed for days. She was just in excruciating pain. She felt like her head was going to explode. She would curl up in a ball and tears would come out of her eyes and she would whimper. And I was concerned that, she wasn't eating and she wasn't drinking. And so I would spoon ice chips into her mouth to try to keep her hydrated. She had difficulty sleeping, but there were times when she could sleep for 15 hours and she would wake up and she would tell me, she said, I don't feel restored. I don't understand it. She said, it's like I haven't even slept, but yet I slept for 15 hours. And it was just this horrible cycle that she had
What was happening
into.
to her mentally?
Well, her life as she knew it was gone. She was a 15-year-old girl who had missed one day of school prior to that as a high school student. And her life was turned upside down. By the time she was a junior in high school, she was homebound, unable to attend school. And we had a teacher that came to our house to teach her when she was up to it. And, she lost friends. She wasn't able to, have the life that a normal 15 or 16-year-old girl would have. And, she lost a lot, and ultimately, she paid the ultimate price with her life. After we spent a year and a half seeing all these specialists with no relief, and it was not for the lack of trying. I know that they all wanted to help her, but there just was no help. We kind of had reached the end of our rope and really had nowhere else to turn. We had a new primary care physician who is fantastic. She's a Lyme literate doctor, and so many of Maddie's symptoms were very similar to Lyme disease. And so I felt like she would be a good fit, and it turned out she was. She looked at all of our records and where we had been, what we had done, and she had us, do a few more tests and see a couple other specialists. But then she told me, she said, I want you to have an open mind, when I tell you what I'm going to tell you next. And she said, I think you need to seek alternative or integrated care. And she said, I've seen fantastic results with my Lyme patients and with my autistic patients. I remember specifically she told me that some of her nonverbal autistic patients had started talking in 2 weeks after they started alternative treatment. And so that gave me hope. And so we went down that path. And I mean, she was still being seen by that doctor. And for the most part, her body healed. She had a very strict diet, which she never cheated on. She was gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free. She ate all organic. And, you know, and by now she's a college student, and that's very difficult, you know, to do when your peers are, you know, eating McDonald's or wherever else they want to go. But she always maintained her diet. And, but the depression was just something that she was never able to overcome. I think, you know, everything that she had been through at such a very young age, I mean, it impacted her life so dramatically. The depression and the anxiety was a huge part of her life, and it's unfortunate that she didn't share a lot of that with us.
What did she talk about when she would tell you how depressed that she felt? Because she couldn't do the things that she used to do before this vaccine.
Yeah, I mean, you know, early on that was what she talked about, and but I really felt like she had improved and she had overcome. And so when she would talk about the depression, it was more about the state of the world. And you know, she had a huge heart, and she had a number of people in her life that were struggling with different things, and I know that she was very concerned about them. And but obviously she had her own issues. She wrote a lot and journaled, and you know, we have that now. And one of the things that she wrote about frequently, which she never shared with me, was that since the vaccine, the Gardasil vaccine, she had this buzzing in her brain. It was this constant buzzing noise. And she said that at times, when she wrote about it, at times it was deafening. At other times it would settle down, but it was always there, and how it exhausted her, and she could never make it stop. And I mean, I thought about, when I read that, I was shocked. I know some of her friends were aware of it as well. And I just thought about that. And I mean, I can't imagine having a constant noise in my brain, and how bothersome that would be, how difficult that would be. And, you know, I think that really what happened is we kind of set up a perfect storm. You know, we had the previously healthy child who was doing well academically in school, who had missed a day of school as a freshman, and then Gardasil happens and her life is turned upside down, and you know, eventually it got to the point where she couldn't take it any longer. You know, even though we felt that her body had healed, her mind had not. And it was too much.
And so June this year, June 2017,
June
what happened? You get a call?
We didn't get a call. It was a Saturday, and I typically hear from her frequently, you know, via text, or she calls or I call, and I realized that I had texted her first thing in the morning when I got up, and I didn't expect that she would respond then. But then I texted her around noon because I was at Whole Foods and I had seen some sort of a supplement that was good for depression and anxiety, and I told her all about it, and, you know, do you want to try it? Because she would not take prescription drugs. She would not. I mean, she had been on every antidepressant you can think of. And it just got to the point where nothing was working, and the combinations that they were prescribing, our pharmacist was uncomfortable with them. And so we got to the point where, I mean, she just, you know, she was just doing the holistic and integrative treatment plan. But she didn't respond to the text then. And then at 3:30 I texted her, 3:30 in the afternoon I texted her again, and that's when I thought, wait a minute, I haven't heard from her all day. So I went and I asked my husband if he had heard from her, and he hadn't. And so I asked my son, he hadn't. And she had a job, a part-time job in the college town where she lived. It was about 35 or 40 minutes from where we live. And I called her place of employment because I thought, well, maybe she's working. And they said, nope, she comes in at 5. And they said, but we'll have her call you when she gets here. And obviously she didn't show up. But by then I had contacted a few other people and no one had heard from her. And then I found out that the restaurant where she worked, they had sent an employee to her house and the police were there. So I called the police in the college town and they wouldn't tell me anything. And so my husband had he'd left the house because he didn't really realize that we were in crisis mode at 3 o'clock when I asked him. But we definitely were by about 4:30 or 5. And so my neighbor drove me to her house, and the police were there, and they told me she had been found at about 5 o'clock.
She's taken her life.
She had taken her life.
This is tragic, beyond tragic.
Yes, because she was a happy, healthy child with an unremarkable health history prior to the Gardasil vaccine. And it's a decision that, I will forever regret.
She had 2 of the 3 vaccines.
Correct. By the time we were approaching the 3rd, we had basically figured out that this is what it had to be. I would stay up all night trying to research and figure out what had happened to her. And I remember one night my husband, he came in and, he wanted me to get some sleep. But he suggested, he said, why don't you make a timeline of all of her absences from school? And I had all that information available through the school's website, so I did. And he said, and then why don't we drop in those 2 doses of Gardasil? And she went downhill after the first one, and then, as I said earlier, the bottom fell out after the second one. And so we were approaching the 3rd and final dose, and we refused it. And we were, I don't know that I would call it bullied, but I was lectured by the receptionist at the gynecologist's practice that said, well, she has to complete the series. Your insurance might not pay for it if you don't complete the series. And, as we both know, it's a very expensive vaccine. And I just remember being taken aback at how she had dealt with me. And I remember I told her, I said, how much is it? And I believe it was about $1,500 for the series back then. And I told her, I said, and you think that losing $1,500 is better than, or not losing $1,500 is better than potentially damaging her further? And I said, I don't care. And, we didn't get it. And I believe I got a second call from a nurse, trying to encourage me, but we still refused. And, when I think back to those days, I can't imagine what the 3rd dose would have done.
No.
I don't.
Did you file it as a vaccine injury? Have you done that?
We have, yes, and it was dismissed.
So you tell me about that. How far did you get with it?
We had a special master assigned to us, and there was discussion between our attorney and her, And of course, all the records were subpoenaed. And they basically said there was not enough. I don't know if they called it evidence, but there was not enough in her records that would convince them that this was a serious adverse reaction. And in the final dismissal, it says that she was 18 by then, and so it was filed under her name, not ours. And it said that she claimed to have debilitating headaches, chronic fatigue, and severe depression following the vaccine, but they dismissed it.
They murdered her. Everybody here wants you to know that they're desperately sorry.
Yes.
Desperately
Thank
sorry.
you.
And let's just show you Maddie again. I hope that the CDC, I hope that Offit, Pan, Eve, and all you other foul trolls out there see this face of this beautiful girl. And Trump, you know what? Guess what? You're head of this country. Your young are dropping like flies because of this vaccine. Her story is just utterly tragic. That poor girl with the noise in her head and the pain. What was she doing at college? What was she studying?
She was a Spanish major. She had spent a
just
semester
beautiful.
abroad in Spain the spring semester. She was in Salamanca, Spain, and she absolutely loved it. And I went to visit, and we had a fantastic time. And I'm so grateful that I made that decision. It was kind of spur of the moment, and it was, I don't know, it felt extravagant, but I'm so glad that I did that because we had a wonderful time there together, and I got to see her, and it was like she was in her element. And her Spanish, I thought it was fantastic. She always felt that it needed improvement, but we had a lovely time.
And how old was she when she died?
21.
21 years old.
21.
What a tragic waste of life. What a beautiful, beautiful girl. It's just disgusting. It really is. Now, the lady that was in here before,
Yes.
I want you to be best friends with her.
I
Because
was
I've
speaking
told
with
her she
mother.
needs to write a book, and we need
Mhm.
Maddie's story in that book. I think it should be a collection. We have to stop this happening. Now, can I use this beautiful picture of Maddie to
Yeah.
put on the...
You can have it.
Thank you. I'm going to put it up right now.
Okay.
Maddie, what? It's just so disgusting. And then meanwhile, we have some idiot with a sign that says vaccines save lives. I mean, please.
I brought this for you too.
World is falling apart. Oh, look. Little Maddie, come sit next to me. Is it M-A-D-D-I-E? or what?
Maddie. Madeline, but she went by Maddie.
Well, she's coming up here next to Chandler, Jimmy, Chris, surrounded by boys.
Okay. She liked boys.
Surrounded by lovely, handsome Christopher and Chandler. Let me just get a pen.
Here.
Both those boys died from the flu vaccine, single flu vaccine. The Gardasil, this is Brittany died from the Gardasil. We have Chris and we have Caitlin down there. So how did you say it's for M-A-D-D?
Maddie.
Beautiful Maddie, joining the fight. So she's just we're down here as well, with the other girls. These are all my little girls here, so she can see that. Yes. Go and see the baby. That's just what you need to do. go and see the beautiful baby.
The pizza restaurant where Maddie worked in, well, she went to KU, which is in Florence, Kansas. Saturday night, her coworkers did a Dying to Donate. Maddie was very passionate about women's safety, and she volunteered at a domestic violence center.
Maddie did?
Yeah, we never knew that. And so
when did you find out about that?
when we were making her arrangements, we were wanting to find a place for donations, and so I asked one of her close friends, and she said, well, you know, she volunteered at the Willow Domestic Violence Center, and I did not know that, and so that's where we asked, you know, if people wanted to make a donation in her memory, we asked that it go there, and so then her coworkers did this Dying to Donate event Saturday night, and the turnout was fantastic, and we met so many wonderful people, you know, that obviously she had touched their lives, but you know, we had not met them prior to that, and it was such an uplifting event. You know, people came up and they said, you know, are you Maddie's mom and dad? And
she was a very special girl.
And they, you know, I only worked here for a month because it wasn't my thing, but let me tell you about your daughter. And, you know, then they would share their memories. And I remember when we drove home that night, our hearts felt full for the first time in a long time. And so, you know, I will never forget her. And I do hope that, you know, one day, I know the reason that we went through the, you know, filing her petition was that, you know, if we do have the opportunity to pursue this further at some point, we've preserved those rights for her. And when she was here, I was her biggest advocate, and I definitely will be there to take up the slack.
Thank you so much. And how's your husband and her brother doing?
You know, we're all doing as
best as
well as can be.
It's only been 2 months.
Yeah, it'll be 8 weeks on the 24th.
So you're going through shock still.
Right. And when it's, you know, we're seeing a grief counselor, and
yes.
She said that it could take 2 years before. The way she described it is before our lives feel organized again, because they do feel very disorganized. You know, the permanence is really starting to set in, and the hole in our family is very real, and you just have to sit with that and acknowledge it. But you know, I tell people, I get out of bed every day and I try.
Well, your story, Maddie's story, is going to help so many.
That's my intent. You know, my intent has never been, I've been vocal about this for a long time, but my intent has never been to tell somebody, because this happened to me, you shouldn't do it. Because this happened to my child, you shouldn't do it. My intent has been just educate yourself. I mean, I didn't look at anything. I just trusted, and I followed the rules. And when I looked at the package insert and I saw how those clinical trials were ran, I mean, it doesn't take a statistician or, you know, a brilliant mind to see what was done. And I wish I had known that prior to giving consent, because I'm sure that we wouldn't be here today.
Yeah. People are telling you that they love you, and they will never forget Maddie. And I'm so glad you're friends with the Robinsons.
Yes.
They are friends with Teresa Robinson, and the Robinson family they are so loving.
Yeah, they are.
You need to go and hold that baby and kiss its cheeks and hang out with them for a bit.
Well, you know, we met when they came. They brought Hannah to see Maddie's doctor, and they lived in our area for the better part of a year. And that's the sacrifice that they made, and that's how we met.
Hannah has a wonderful photograph of her and Maddie together. It's on her wall. If you go to Hannah Robinson's wall, you will see a beautiful picture of Maddie and Hannah together.
But so that's how we became friends, and I need to go visit and hold that baby.
You certainly do need to give it lots of cuddles. We're going to make sure that we're there. But really, you need to know how many people love you, and give our love to your husband and her brother as well. It's tough. It's going to be a tough road ahead.
No, it is. I know. But the other day, my husband said something to me that I thought was really fitting, and he said, I never thought about it this way, he said, but we've had years of training, because we started fighting in 2012, and now it's 2017. It's the same fight, but yet it's a different fight. But we're strong, and I'm confident that we'll get through it. But it's not anything that I would wish on another family.
No. And we will get justice for Maddie and all the other girls that have had their lives taken. We will get this vaccine taken off the market. If it kills us all, we are going to do this. We have to do it. And they're now trying to give it to babies. Can you imagine? So yeah, everybody here is unanimous in that this vaccine comes off the market. And as we say that, we get censored by Periscope. Okay, we're coming off social media, and we have more stories here. That's just interesting.
How'd you get censored?
Because we say silly things like we're going to take the HPV Gardasil off the market, and then it goes crackle, snap, pop, bang, down we go. All right, okay, we're coming off, guys. We will be back on with the next story, and everybody truly, truly loves you.
Autism destroys families, and more importantly, it destroys our greatest resource, which are our children.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
pledged to find out what is driving the country's rise in autism.
Compiling medical records from a number of databases. He'll direct resources to study environmental factors, exposures, and external factors.
Scientific progress on this has been slow because scientists are frankly scared to ask the question.
Genes don't cause epidemics. You need an environmental toxin, and we're going to look at all the potential culprits.
With no a priori thumb on the scale, you can't look at that.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful to the Secretary for finally saying from an important public platform that this is an epidemic and we need to find the causes and we need to stop it.
Other issues CHC has been pushing for years are finally gaining mainstream traction.
Today we're announcing we are removing industry members, pharma members from FDA advisory committees.
We're seeing reports that you're considering removing the COVID vaccine as a mandatory shot for children.
The recommendation for children was always dubious. The vaccine itself does have profound risk of myocarditis, pericarditis, even strokes.
Very, 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 very few people are still taking these things. In that sense, the mRNA vaccines for COVID in the marketplace are effectively dead.
We are working together to change the federal fluoride recommendations, and we're looking at the science now. There's a direct inverse correlation between fluoride exposure and low IQ in children.
Health officials announced plans to phase out 8 artificial dyes from our food supply.
The FDA is effectively removing all petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply.
We don't have a surveillance system that actually works, and that is a crime. And we will do that right away. And I understand the perverse incentives that need to be changed right away.
When there's a political will to answer a question like this, it will happen.
We're going to change things for real this time.